Joseph, what is the current state of warehouse automation?
So the sector is seeing increased interest on daily basis with almost all Fortune 100 companies that started participating in this motion. Warehouse automation is not anymore reserved for first movers, not even fast followers, but we're really seeing broader market adopting automation, doubling down on automation. And for robotics vendors such as Gideon, that's a big thing. So we've seen by now largest retailers or largest logistics companies doubling down on that, devoting their programs to fully automating warehouses, starting with largest facilities with plans to scale across their entire networks. Then when thinking about like what really happened, how was it enabled? Yeah, AI plays a very big role here. I'd say like this gives us tools to address use cases that were not solved in the past. And Gideon is being one of those companies that's really solving one of the hardest problems there, talking about automation of loading bay, loading and unloading of truck trailers. So that's one side. So the vendors are here. On the other side, customers desire that end-to-end automation. And now with more building blocks being in place, they can really think about automation big time. They can really think about automation more holistically, not necessarily anymore about pursuing inefficient hybrid automation approaches where they automate only part of the process, but essentially they're not really impacting their bottom line. So right now we are at that tipping point. We're at that inflection point. We're seeing more of those use cases being truly automated. And so in combination, that's like end-to-end automation. So automation today becomes more holistic thing. And that's really big enabler and big accelerator for adoption.
What's driving that adoption? Is it the labor cost? Is it the labor reliability? Is it economics with a potential recession on the horizon? Or is just this is the future and companies are investing in the future?
So it's a little bit about everything you mentioned. So for sure, customers primarily think about how they optimize their ROI, how they become more labor resilient. The fact is that people today don't want to do this job anymore. People are not dreaming of moving material from one point to another. Young people are not dreaming about driving forklifts to load and unload truck trailers. And so there's a number of those factors that combined together mean that today to motivate someone to drive forklift, it's very costly on one side. But even if companies put a lot of money on the table and pay like $100,000 a year for forklift driver, there's not so many people who want to do that work for that amount of money. So it's not anymore about just motivating people with giving more dollars. It's about having more purpose. And really, there's not a lot of purpose with moving goods if we have automation today that can address that problem.
And there's a lot of talk, it's been publicized a lot in the United States, that there's a truck driver shortage. But you look globally, we live in a global interconnected market. There's a forklift driver shortage. One of the largest markets suffering from a forklift driver shortage is Japan, to the point where the government is subsidizing and getting involved trying to get forklift drivers. You're based in Croatia. You're also based here in the United States. Obviously, the forklift automation is a global solution. What do you see as the largest markets? Will Japan, just because the forklift driver shortage, be one of those large accelerated markets that Gideon could look to expand into in the future?
So Japanese market is definitely one of those markets where we see a lot of pull, a lot of interest from customers. So yeah, Japanese market for sure. Another example besides the North American side, US and Canada, another good example is UK market. Like I can share one specific number from Yorkshire region, where over the course of 5 years, the average age of a forklift driver grew for 4 years. So this sounds like almost mathematically impossible. But yeah, over 5 years, average age grew for 4. It just tells us that young people don't want to do that job. So the only path to solving the problem is automation. So that with demographic conditions and motion, both in Japan, in big part of Europe, and also in North America, does definitely mean that we will need a lot more automation in the future. We will need a lot more autonomous forklifts.
Well, a lot more automation. You have to think of NVIDIA, and Gideon very successfully has a public partnership with NVIDIA. You're using their Isaac Robotics platform. Is that helping you to accelerate growth with that partnership?
So NVIDIA is an incredible company. And we see these days on the stock market side, the world is recognizing that very heavily these days. So NVIDIA and Gideon together collaborate on bringing AI to market to solve some of those unsolved problems. And although I can't talk much about the specific joint work we do with NVIDIA at this moment, I can assure that NVIDIA does think big. And having in mind robotics, seeing the next way of rollout, they really target huge adoption of robotics. So historically, they were more focused on personal computers, on data centers, but they see that there is huge motion around robotics. And they also recognize that with all AI capabilities that are in place today, with hardware which is enabling all that, like we are really at a point when robotics has come like closer than ever to that massive adoption. Of course, it will take a little bit of time until we get fully there, but NVIDIA is now recognizing that as a huge market potential for them. And our joint work is the path that will just provide another building block to that massive adoption.
The market's there. We have all the talk on Wall Street now about humanoid robots, Tesla with their Optimus robot. You're seeing a lot of excitement around that. And let's get technical for a moment here. Do you have to develop a separate stack for a humanoid robot versus an autonomous forklift versus an autonomous truck versus an autonomous vehicle versus an autonomous yard truck? Or are there elements that they can be combined?
That's a great question. Like robotics and autonomy, in my opinion, requires a lot of dedication to application. The history of robotics and autonomy has seen many attempts to tackle multiple applications, multiple use cases at the same time, and expecting very high level of overlap in that core technology. And it very rarely worked out. That's what we already learned historically. I don't see any reason why it would be different this way. Yes, AI is moving forward. We do have generative AI capabilities today that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago. But still, I do see trucking market, warehouse automation market, and some others as broadly different problems. And they're different from physical operations side, but also different from the perspective, the nature of those customers. So I think, and I'm sure that companies who participate in any of those markets will stay focused on solving one problem at a time. And yes, once again, like autonomous trucking market, yard trucking, yard autonomy, warehouse automation, those are, although they do share sometimes core technologies, they are still heavily different problems. And companies will stay focused on applications. I'm sure shareholders, boards will take care that companies are not spreading the focus too far away from solving one particular use case, because each of those opportunities, no matter which one you pick, all of those are massive. And it's not only about solving that core technology problem, it's really about executing the entire change management to really adopt automation at scale. That's going to be, I think, bigger challenge than just solve core technology.
Bingo. Bingo, bingo, bingo. You said it. And I'm going to put it in my own words. Business. If you're going to adopt a technology, if a warehouse operator or warehouse owner or a tenant of that warehouse can adopt a technology, they have to understand fundamentally how it is going to impact their business. You have alphabet soup. I want to be everything to everybody. Well, I can do autonomous trucks. I can do autonomous forklifts. I can do autonomous motorcycles. That doesn't work because they're different businesses. How large is the market for autonomous forklifts, and how do you see businesses adopting them? Is it be food packaging? Will it be beverages? Will it be construction supplies? How do you see that being adopted?
So first of all, on the market size, just to paint the picture on the North American side, or US more specifically, there is today over 1 million forklift drivers in the US. And if we think about what are the core processes, it's essentially 3 processes: trailer loading and unloading, put away replenishment, and order fulfillment. So those 3 processes really takes million people or more to power that. More specific, like for one use case that we are focused on, trailer loading and unloading, there's around 340,000 forklift drivers solving that particular problem. And the total annual cost of those processes are around $150 billion. So the market is huge. The TAM is very large. And now there's the question, is it worth focusing on multiple problems when each one of those is so big, so significant? We can look at that from trucking market side or from warehouse labor side. In both cases, we talk about like tens of billions of dollars in TAM that need to be addressed in each one of those use cases on the warehouse automation side.
There's riches and niches. When you have a $150 billion TAM, you can have a very successful business, a very successful exit. The warehouse automation sector generally is hot. VCs are chasing the sector in a pretty substantial way. You have an investment from one of the largest commercial real estate owner-operators in the country in Prologis, Todd Lewis, who led that. Todd, how you doing? You made a great investment here, sir. Will we continue to see VCs chase this automated warehouse space?
Yeah, by the way, hi, Todd. Yeah, and it's a pleasure to have Prologis Ventures on Gideon's side. So yeah, we see a lot of interest from venture capital market, and I would say that's already in motion for several years. What we started seeing more recently is much expanded interest from the corporate venture arms. So corporates, either they're coming into the play, into the mix with the lenses of end users, so companies who really want to adopt automation, or companies who are tech companies and they see this kind of new wave of technologies as their ticket for transformation of the businesses. We can think about large OEMs, can think about large tech vendors to a supply chain world. But in both cases, we see a lot of that interest from strategic partners. So, on top of venture capital firms that have historically been very active in the space, we now see many more players that want to participate in this game, that see that massive potential, and they know they need to adopt or they need to transform themselves to stay competitive for the years ahead.
If corporate VC strategic, so obviously they want to integrate it into their business. So there's a clear use case for that. There's a clear exit. Then that raises consolidation. When do we have consolidation? Because every day I'm reading, oh, a new autonomous forklift company popped up. Oh, great. Here we go. Without real business sense. When does consolidation come, or does the wave just come in and wash out the companies that really don't have the right business models?
That's a good one, because in the last year or so, maybe a little bit more, we started seeing something that appeared as like early signs of consolidation, because there were some acquisitions happening here and there. And some people were saying, yeah, we're seeing consolidation. That's it. We're going to end up with only a few big players. But the fact is that we were living in a time of tough capital markets. And so I believe that most of those, or many of those acquisitions, were a pure result of that tough condition in the marketplace, and not necessarily the natural consolidation typically influenced by maturity of businesses or maturity of the market. In some of those use cases that are massive, we still have the penetration at like way below 1%. So right now, we're seeing that capital markets are coming back into robotics, heavily back, right? We are seeing very large investments in robotics companies. And there's going to be more opportunity for innovative companies to build things in warehouse automation space before we come to the real wave of consolidation. So I believe it's going to take a little bit of time before we get there.
We'll be watching the market to see what happens. In your opinion, what does the future of the market look like?
We're going to see a lot more automation than we see today. But now putting ourselves 10 years ahead, 10 years in the future, and then looking backwards, I'm pretty sure that the warehouse space or supply chain overall will look completely reinvented. Now, what does that mean? I think it comes more with an end-to-end flavor. So you mentioned a few areas of that automation or opportunities of that use case in the beginning. So right now, when we walk into an automated warehouse, we typically see the automated core process of order fulfillment. Now, with new technologies, it goes beyond that. It goes to automating fully that loading bay, right? For loading and unloading. But then that's not all. Then there's a yard. Automation of yard expands further. And finally, I believe in 10 years from now, we will have high level of automation in core process, order fulfillment, in loading bay, in yard, but we will also see some degree of automation of the middle mile. So the automation between these large distribution centers and spoke locations, stores, smaller DCs, that part will also get more and more automated. So looking into supply chain more holistically, I believe like 10 years from now, it's going to be much more reinvented.
A lot more automation is coming, and we're going to have you back to continually talk about the automation that's coming. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Gideon. Josip, thank you so much for coming on the Road to Autonomy Insights today.
Thank you, Grayson. It was a pleasure.